So what does this mean now for the Prince and his role in the royal family? Well, we're joined by our royal editor, Camilla Tominey, and former Spin Dr. Alastair Campbell to hear their thoughts. Welcome to both of you. So really, this latest victim to come forward and speak out, what she's saying is that the girls at Epstein's homes were not hidden, and then it upsets her that anyone associated with Epstein might not see that. So this leads to the question, did the Prince know more? She's saying he must have.
Well, this is the problem with the original interview that he did with Emily Maitlis, this idea that it is actually posing more questions than it's answered. And this sense as well, I think that Jane Doe has said that she felt that the Duke of York had been used as bait. Of course, the main criticism has been at him staying at Epstein's house in New York. So that is tricky. But I think moving forward, the narrative of this story is going into all different directions, questioning whether the Duke of York can continue in his royal role. We've had KPMG, a sponsor of his Pitch at Palace initiative, that's a key plank of his charitable work, now saying they're not going to sponsor the event anymore. Other charities he's associated with distancing themselves. So I think this is a bad situation that is getting worse by the day, to be honest.
How, because this was all in a press conference yesterday in Los Angeles, or overnight in Los Angeles, obviously UK time a bit different, but what did she say was her story? Who is Jane Doe?
Jane Doe is, like Virginia Roberts, a victim who claims to have been groomed. The interview, unfortunately, because he has been criticised for not really expressing enough remorse or sorrow or regret on behalf of the victims.
Last night's press conference, this was the nugget within there, that he should be held accountable. He should go back, he should talk to the FBI. He gave an hour-long interview, so why wouldn't he speak to the FBI?
You're asking me to be Prince Andrew's spokesman here. Look, I don't know why he wouldn't, and I do think the interview was very ill-advised. I don't think he thought through the consequences. I don't think that he had understood that if you put yourself out like that... I mean, fair play, take all the questions. Emily Maitlis, a very, very good interviewer. He wasn't, as it were, just trying to get soft soap somewhere. He was out there. But I think it's just, as Camilla says, it's just unleashed all these little threads that before, people like you probably weren't pulling that hard because there were other stories to cover that were more important, more significant within the royal family. So I think he's really opened up a can of worms for himself. It's really interesting, I think, with the public. It's become a classic example of sometimes where what I think I would say is a sort of low-level frenzy, and the media love frenzies, but I think there's a danger that he is, by the way that he's handled it and by doing the interview, I think he's turning it into a crisis for himself.
You were a principal player in the aftermath between Downing Street and Buckingham Palace of the horrible death of Princess Diana. And so... is this, would you say, of a similar ground shaker?
No, I really don't think so. I think that was... Just remember the public reaction at the time. It wasn't just that people were talking about it, they felt involved in it. They were going to the palace. There was a real sense of involvement by the public. And also, it did directly impact upon the Queen and upon Prince Charles. I think that this is very much about Prince Andrew. And I think there'll be all sorts of suggestions of, you know, the Queen should say something and Prince Charles. I would strongly advise against that. I think they should stay right out of it. That doesn't mean that the Queen as a mother doesn't feel this is kind of, you know, something to keep her awake at night. But I think in terms of the institution of the monarchy, I don't think this is that significant, to be absolutely frank. I think it's a frenzy that if they're not careful, they turn into a crisis, but it's a crisis for him, not the monarchy. So
what do we know of the Queen, then? Does she support the Prince on this? I mean, there were reports that he was seen at church when the Queen was there and he was sort of bragging about how well this interview had gone.
So apparently he was at church with her on Sunday where he turned and said to her, reportedly, that he thought that the interview had been a huge success.
But hold on, how do we know that?
Because it's been reported.
Exactly.
So much is reported. I think we've got to take that with a pinch of salt.
Hence why
Who was
the
there?
Word reportedly.
Yeah.
That wasn't my story.
So it may possibly...
A story I have written, which I stand by, which was the Telegraph splash yesterday, was this idea that the Queen hasn't actually approved this interview. So the Buckingham Palace statement remains. She was made aware of the interview, but they haven't added that she gave it her blessing. Emily Maitlis wrote a piece for The Times in which she suggested that Prince Andrew had said you need to go further up the pecking order, and that implicit in that was the idea of the Queen giving her permission, and it was recorded in Buckingham Palace.
Yeah.
But there does seem to be still this message coming out from Buckingham Palace that didn't necessarily have the Queen's blessing, just that she knew it was going on. But furthermore, just with the Jane Doe allegations, the optics of this, I'm sure Alastair will agree, revelations like the pizza, I couldn't have been at Tramp nightclub because I was at Pizza Express, but I don't normally go to places like Pizza Express. And using expressions like describing Epstein's behaviour as unbecoming talks into this narrative of privileged, powerful men abusing their position. Now, obviously, that is the correct allegation to make against Epstein, but this is then tarring Prince Andrew by association. The whole point of the interview was to distance and draw a line and say, a mea culpa, I've made mistakes, but it hasn't had that effect. It's fuelled the flames of publicity. Of course, journalists like me and not just in this country, in America, are now poring over every single line, and rightly so. He was there for an hour talking about it.
So, Alastair, how does he get himself out of this then? I mean, you believe that when it comes to his charity work, he should absolutely continue, that he shouldn't be taking any time to step down, that he should just sort of plough on forward with this until it all falls away?
Well, I don't think he has any choice. And the thing is, it's not like a politician who's involved in this, because, you know, he's not going to get sacked. He's got friends. He's got to find other people who will step in. Now, and I think the other thing that I think is important from his perspective, I think Camilla's right that the content. It's interesting. I've been interested in talking to just like taxi drivers and people in the, you know, guys talking to the CBI yesterday, just serving the coffee, and he was like, "What's all this fuss about? I don't really get it. I watched it with my mum. I thought he wasn't that bad." I think with the public, when there's these media frenzies going on, the public are always a little bit. They're not in the same place as the media. That's what he needs to play into. And I think that, I mean, Camilla's absolutely right. It was all about the tone. It was the sense of a entitled, privileged guy. And here's the other problem for the royals. I remember this, and to their credit, they recognised in the week of Diana's death that they maybe needed a bit of popular opinion support, as it were. But I think the royals, and particularly the ones a bit lower down, I think they're just surrounded by sycophants. They're told the whole time he will have come out of that interview and people have said to him, that was great.
Yes. Yeah,
that was really, really good. And then other people in the royal household will be thinking, oh my God, he's screwed up, because they're very competitive.
Yeah, they are. In fact, the inherently dynastic nature of the royal household means that every house hunkers down. And so while the Duke of York is now in trouble and his private office in trouble, the rest of the family has to insulate against that. We saw that a little bit with the Sussexes, you know, people within the family become increasingly isolated because that is how the royal family has worked for generations.
Meghan is probably sitting there thinking, you know, somebody else is getting it now. Thank God for that. So I think, I mean, yes, they're a family, but they're also one of the most high-profile families in the world. So they react like human beings as well as institutions.
Well, whatever happens, then, you know, I think it's important at this stage to you know, spare a moment for what those girls went through.
Absolutely.
And for what this actually is all about, which in itself is shocking to the core. Thank you very much indeed.